The Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, On Screen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to On Screen, the official podcast of the Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today, we're going to be talking about some experiences from a little indie game that came out just recently, The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. We're going to talk about kind of some of our thoughts about the game in general, and also go over a few anecdotes, because that's what this game, the discussion about this game is all about. It's all about those little stories of weird and funny things that happen to you along your own personal journey in this game. And so we're going to cover some of that. I got one to read out from somebody else that sent one into us, and we're going to read their story as well. And then we're going to cover Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves in full spoilers. It just recently hit Paramount Plus. It's a fun fantasy movie, and we're going to talk about that at the end of the podcast. But let's get started first with our On the Horizon segment. On the Horizon, of course, where we talk about stuff that's coming up in the next week or so. Got a few things coming up, not too many, but I thought we should leave it in and go over them. So first up, Clone High is returning on Tuesday, May 23rd on Max, which is, the May 23rd is kind of like, remember that they did like the Disney Plus Day or something? I guess that's like Max's version of that. That's when they're officially rebranding to Max from HBO Max.
Oh, yeah.
Did you watch Clone High, like when it used to be on like, I don't know, what was that, 20 years ago?
No, I've never watched that show.
Okay.
I have no history with that.
It had a little bit of a cult popularity. It's basically all these historical figures that were cloned and they're going to high school together.
Right, yeah.
And like the main character is like Abraham Lincoln, and like Joan of Arc is in it, and that's like the girl he likes, if I remember correctly. And there's like John F. Kennedy is like his friend or something. There's all these historical, it's just a comedy, animated comedy with all these historical figures. But that is returning on Tuesday, May 23rd on Max, formerly HBO Max. Also, on that same day, because it's HBO Max Day apparently, or Max Day apparently, Gremlins, Max Day. Gremlins Secret of the Mogwai is hitting. That is the animated, family-friendly kind of prequel series to Gremlins. That is coming Tuesday, May 23rd on Max. I know you're not too excited about this. You are a big Gremlins fan, but you weren't too excited about this one.
No, I mean, I like the movies, but yeah, like, this is just a cartoon. Like, I don't care. Sorry. I don't.
So the next day, on Wednesday, May 24th on Disney Plus, American-born Chinese debuts. This is like a new, like, action series for Disney Plus. It's directed by Shang-Chi's Destin Daniel Cretton, though.
Right,
so,
yeah.
And Michelle Yeoh and Ki Hugh Kwan are both in it. So it's kind of like, I'm curious. Like, in one sense, I'm like, oh, it's like a Disney Channel original kind of thing, I guess, skewing a little bit younger and stuff. But then I'm like, oh, it's the Shang-Chi director. And Michelle Yeoh and Ki Hugh Kwan from Everywhere All at Once are in it together again in this one, so I'm kind of like, I don't know, might be good. It's got people. And I always say that, like, if it's got people.
It's got people, yeah.
It's worth paying attention to, at least.
Right.
Then, also on Wednesday, May 24th on Apple TV Plus, Platonic comes out. This is a new comedy series starring Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne. They were in that movie Neighbors together, playing like a husband and wife.
Yeah.
This is about them being like platonic friends, I guess, or something.
That's the thing. I don't know. Anytime I hear, like, name Seth Rogen now, like, I just get weary. Like,
it's a mixed bag, right? On one hand, you got, like, Preacher. On another hand, you got, like...
yeah, you got... I haven't, like,
what,
really...
The Pickle? Remember the movie The Pickle?
Oh, geez, yeah. Like, Sausage Party.
Yeah.
That garbage. And, like, his fantastic performance in Mario, which, like, I haven't seen the movie, but I mean, I've heard Donkey Kong, and it's Seth Rogen, and he even, like, admitted in an interview, he said he doesn't do voices.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so your job could have went to somebody who would actually, like, attempt a voice. It's nice to know that you took that job away from an actual voice actor. And
it's funny, going into the Mario movie, everybody was hating on Chris Pratt.
Yes.
Coming out of the Mario movie, everyone was hating on Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think the voice that didn't work, and it's not because the guy's not talented or didn't do work, but it just didn't fit, was Cranky Kong, which is Fred Armisen. I'm like, this voice it just doesn't work. It just doesn't fit at all. That was the one that bothered me, that took me out of it. But yeah, I mean, Seth Rogen was just Seth Rogen.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, I'm just a bit weary of Seth Rogen lately, but anyway, continue.
Lastly, on Thursday, May 25th, FUBAR comes to Netflix. This is that Arnold Schwarzenegger TV series where it's like him and his daughter, and they're both agents.
went over this on the podcast last week.
We talked about the trailer. No, I think it was a couple weeks ago, but...
Okay. Feels like last week, man.
Yeah.
but yeah. This is the comedy series with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It looks funny. Looks alright.
Looks like it could go either way. Looks like it could just be a fun, charming show that you just put on and do something else and kind of just enjoy it. And, or like it could just become like really annoying. Who knows? But I mean, I'm going to check it out. I need more comedies. I always need more comedies. Too many, even the comedies we're getting are getting dark, you know? I need to laugh sometimes. That's it for our On the Horizon segment, though. Now let's move on to On Tap.
What we've been watching. What we've been playing. What's on tap.
Last week, this was the only thing we knew we were going to be talking about this week for sure. And that is The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. This game came out on Friday, May 12th, and it's just taken over the internet. It's all anybody's talking about. But, yeah, I mean, what are your, like, we'll get to anecdotes later and stories about other things later, but what is your kind of like general impression of this? Like, I guess contrasting with Breath of the Wild, other, or other things that you had issues with, things that worked well, things that surprised you, without getting into stories yet.
Here we go, without getting into stories. So for the most part, it plays like standard Breath of the Wild. Like, if you've played Breath of the Wild, you know what to expect mostly, but then, like, the new powers come into it, and they come into it early on, because, like, it's like Breath of the Wild, where the game, like, starts you off, and they have you do the shrine, give you the new abilities, and have you do some simple puzzles with the new abilities, but, I mean, they're significant, and we know, like, the Ultra Hand is a game changer, literally, because it changes, like, how you approach the game. Like, early on, you get the Ultra Hand, you get the tutorial in the form of, a temple, and you get to do some, like, really basic stuff with it. And then, like, not too long after that, you're tasked with making your way to another temple, and you come across, this body of water. There's no way around. You can't swim, you don't have enough stamina to swim, but the temple is right there. It's right in front of you. If only you had a way, and you do, because you have the materials lying around to use the Ultra Hand to build a boat. And what I love about Zelda as a series, Zelda here, it does what it always traditionally does. It gives you just enough context, just enough clues to figure out that you're supposed to build yourself a boat without actually explicitly telling you to build a boat. There's no NPC standing there going, oh man, if only you had a boat, you get over there. There's an NPC chopping wood. It tells you, like, oh, you can chop wood out trees. But, like, there's nobody telling you what you're supposed to be doing. There's just, like, the context of, oh yeah, you got this ability. There's all this stuff littered all over the place because these islands are a mess. Nobody cleans, like, none of these robots are programmed to clean, apparently. So all this stuff is all over the place. And yeah, from that, you piece it together. You start building a boat. And it's just like, that's the brilliance of Zelda. That's where the brilliance comes in, because you feel like you've solved this on your own. Like, you've accomplished stuff without the game. It's a tutorial, but it's not hand-holdy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's like an invisible hand. They're guiding you the whole way, basically. I mean, less so, I guess, in these two games, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah.
They give you a bit more freedom, but they guide you pretty heavily, actually, but they don't do it so directly. They kind of do it like in a subtle way, so that like when you discover something, you have that aha moment, you know, and you feel like a genius.
It harkens back to the original Zelda, and I've always said Breath of the Wild and now Tears of the Kingdom definitely are all about bringing back the spirit of the original Legend of Zelda, where the first screen is they drop you in the world, you're next to a cave, but nobody tells you to go into that cave. There's nothing stopping you from going anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have a weapon, and you get your weapon by going into a cave. But again, nobody is telling you, no NPCs is going to stand there and say, you don't have a weapon, don't go that way.
Well,
you
there's that huge bit of like exposition and tutorial right when you go into the cave. I mean, you get told that it's dangerous.
Yeah, it's
and
dangerous.
To take this.
But you have to go into the cave. You have to go into the cave first to get that, to even get that dialogue. So you have to be curious enough to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that spirit exists in this game. And I just think it's brilliant to like just subtly lead the player via cues and clues, and instead of just telling the player what to do and preventing them from like doing anything else if they don't do what you want them to do.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody about this just recently where they were kind of like downplaying the world of like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And I was saying like, no, you can't do that, because the difference between these Zelda games, these two Zelda games particularly, and other big open world games is most other open world games, they kind of procedurally generate the world and then alter it. So they use a computer to basically have the world kind of create its own hills and everything. And then they go in there and they go, okay, well, let's tweak this a little bit. Let's adjust this. Let's put some runes here. Let's put a house here. That's kind of how the design works for like big open world games.
Yeah.
But that is not at all how design worked for the Zelda games. Those worlds are 100% handcrafted. And there's tricks that they do. Like, there's pathways you can find and stuff. But there's also like paths that aren't marked, where like the way that the horizon line rolls and the way light hits it is done intentionally to intrigue you, so that you go, wait, is something over there? And then when you go over there, you'll reach like a huge vista. And the point of that is that when you see that huge vista and you get this wide expansive view of things, they can plant all sorts of things around there. Like, oh, there's a glowing shrine over here. There's a tower over here. There's like an enemy encampment over here. There's a giant wooden horse head sticking out that means there's a stable over there, you know? All those things are designed intentionally to intrigue you. And then when you start heading towards one of those, you're like, okay, I reached my vista. I saw like 10 points of interest. I want to go do this one. And you start heading in that direction. The game will intentionally have distractions along that path to like go, oh, well, you could do that, but what about this? There's a guy being attacked by a goblin or a boblin over here, you know? Like, why don't you go save him? See what happens then. It's brilliantly designed, much more so than like any other open world game I've ever played.
Yeah.
And it's so much intentional. And like I said, it's completely handcrafted. They didn't generate like the hills and stuff using like a computer algorithm. They shaped that with intention and purpose.
Yeah, everything is deliberate in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no randomly generated anything.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's so impressive about it to me. That's what, because it's that invisible hand. Yes, the world is big and open, but they've purposely carved out paths, and some of them are invisible. Some of them there's like a literal pathway, and it's like, oh, I guess I'll follow this pathway. Sometimes it's like, it's just the way the hills slope. Like, it's designed with that purpose, and there isn't any actual path. It's just, but you're on a path without realizing it, you know, and that's what's so clever about it.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the abilities. You mentioned Ultra Hand and being able to construct things. I think
like
the two key abilities are similar. Like, they feel like they kind of go together, and that's Ultra Hand and Fuse.
Yes.
Fuse becomes very important because it's like weapons are even worse than they were in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah,
everything's like destroyed and weak.
Yeah, the weapons seem to be weak, but then again, like, I'm at the beginning of the game, so like I can't like really. Most of my weapons are like rusty broadswords and like sticks, and like I expect those to break pretty easily, so it's nothing surprising. I will say yes, Fuse, the difference between Ultra Hand and Fuse is Ultra Hand allows you to fuse items that you find out in the world, while Fuse allows you to fuse together items in your inventory, and it's much more limited. Like, you can't...
Yeah. I mean, you can only do 2 things.
You can only do 2 things at a time. Yeah, exactly. So you can't go crazy like with the Ultra Hand.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still very useful. I mean, one of the applications of Fuse was like finding these like fire stones and then using Fuse to attach them to your arrows to make fire arrows. That was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, attaching rocks and boulders to like your swords and sticks and then just bashing down walls of rocks is like really satisfying.
Yeah, I'll tell you without spoiling, because I'm a bit ahead of you. There are like cave systems you can go in that are just, it's almost like you're carving out a path. There's so many of those rocks.
Nice.
And basically as you're destroying rocks, other rocks and like rusted swords and stuff will also be embedded in the wall and they'll fall out so that you can make new ones as you break them. And it's almost like SteamWorld Dig, like where you're like digging your own path. And it's kind of fun to go through and do that. But yeah, those two kind of abilities kind of go together, and they're very similar thematically. They work differently. They have different purposes. Ultra Hand is, of course, the bigger ability, and Fuse is kind of more...
I gotta say, like, it's deliberate too. Like, their importance is also shown in the order they're given to you. No mistake that Ultra Hand is the first ability you're given in the game. Fuse is the second, and then Ascend is like the third.
I got Ascend second. I missed Fuse and had to go find it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But
that's interesting that you can like actually do that.
Yeah, I don't know if you can do Ultra Hand second because it's kind of presented to you right away.
I don't see how you would get very far without the Ultra Hand, considering like some of the areas you have to traverse are literally impossible without being able to make the things you need to get past them. But
knowing the way people figure out this game, you know,
that's true.
There's probably a way to do it. But I did Ultra Hand, Ascend, then Fuse, then Recall. That was like the order in which I got them.
Recall is like the last one you get.
Yeah. I'm really impressed with Ascend. It's the ability that you forget. This happened in Zelda too. Like, I think it was stasis for most people. Like, you just kind of forget about that ability, and then something will happen and you're like, oh yeah, I have a good ability for that, you know? And Ascend is kind of like that version of it. It's the one you just often forget about. But it's insane to think about the amount of work that must have gone into making that work in this game. Because it literally works like everywhere. Like, they said there's restrictions for where it won't work, but the only restrictions that I've found in this entire game so far, I mean, there might be other ones, but the only ones I found have been like, if a surface is like too slanted, like it's almost not like a ceiling, it's more like a slant, or if it's just too far away. Those are like the only instances I found where Ascend doesn't really work. And the way it's just interlinked in everything in the game, the way there's so many little underground places in this game. There's like wells that you can go in, and they're like little mini caves and stuff all over the place that they added in this game from Breath of the Wild. They just carved out whole sections and stuff. And the way that you can use Ascend to, like, you know, you might see like a locked building, and then you find a well, and you go in the well, and you're like, wow, this is a big well. I wonder if I can get to that locked building. So you go back out, you climb up to the top of that building, you go into your map screen, set a marker there, then drop in the well, find that marker, use Ascend, and you're in the building. It's really cool. You know, it's like, that's a really cool thing, you know? It's like a cool different type of game design added on top of this, and it works really well. I enjoy it. I think the animation is hilarious too, of Link swimming in the air.
Oh yeah, I love that animation.
And then Recall is one that I haven't quite gotten the hang of for more than like puzzles. Like, you can use it in combat and do all sorts of crazy stuff with Recall, but like outside of puzzles, I just don't think I react quick enough to use it properly.
Right.
Like, I could use it, but like, it's not my first instinct when I'm in combat to use Recall. So instead I do other things, but in puzzles, it's pretty fun to do. There's also, you can do some pretty clever stuff with it. One of the things I did one time is I had completely, again, like I'd mentioned how I forget Ascend all the time. I was in a cave, completely forgot about Ascend, which would have taken me right out of there immediately. But it was a cave that you fell through a well to get to, and there was no ladder to get back up to the well. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? And so what I figured out was that I used Ultra Hand to pick up like a plank of wood or something that was around there, or a rock. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
And I raised it up as high as I could, and I was able to get it basically all the way up to the inside of the well, or to like the well, so I'd be able to grab to the side if I got there. And then I dropped the rock, and then I used recall on the rock and jumped on top of it, and it went up. And then I jumped into the inside of the wall and crawled out. I'm like, that's so cool. Like the way you can like use these abilities in just kind of ways that are not described to you at all, but they're like really fun and interesting. You know, if you just think about it a little bit, it's like, oh, there's another way I can handle this. You know, there's another way I can do this that I just wasn't thinking of, and it's really cool.
Yeah. And again, the way these games are built, and it's so amazing.
Mm-hmm. What's your opinion of this next to Breath of the Wild? The start's a little bit different. It's similar in that you get the abilities the same kind of way with the shrines.
I think it's too early to say that, but so I'm gonna hold off until I've played a good amount of the game before I can give a verdict on that. Right now, aside from the new abilities, it feels mostly the same game, which is not bad. That's not a bad thing. But again, like the Ultra Hand is like a major new mechanic that doesn't exist in Breath of the Wild,
mm-hmm.
that has unlimited potential, and so we'll have to see where that goes, and this could end up surpassing Breath of the Wild for me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's too early to tell for either of us. I mean, I'm further in the game than you are, but even for me, it's too early to say. But I just mean like the tutorial part. Like, I think I liked the tutorial in Breath of the Wild a little bit more. I think it was a little more direct.
Yeah, yeah.
And it just kind of felt like it just flowed a little bit better to me. Like, it kind of feels like in Tears of the Kingdom. Well, first off, Tears of the Kingdom has this like really long story sequence to play out before you even really get control. Like, they give you a brief moment of control. You can kill some Keeses, you know?
Yeah.
But then besides that, basically, it's like, I don't know, about 15, 20 minutes of of story that you like.
Story. I mean, it's good story.
Yeah.
Like, I guess it's for all the people complaining that Breath of the Wild didn't have a story or whatever. It did. I think one of the big problems is like
experience a story. It doesn't have to be.
I think one of the big problems with Breath of the Wild is like a lot of the story beats were flashbacks
mm-hmm.
that you had to like seek out and find.
Yeah, see, I was perfectly fine with that. I know so many people had an issue with that, and I'm like, there's more than one way to experience a story. You know,
I guess a lot of people didn't do that, and that's why they're like, oh, no story. I'm like, well, yeah, the story's there. Yeah. I'm fine with that too. It's like a different way of telling a story. I think it's more immersive way of telling a story than like just to have like cutscenes happen at like every major beat.
Well, with the way they did the memories in Breath of the Wild, it just felt very, I don't know, melancholy in a way, and I really like that. That's like I talk about like my favorite ending of Cyberpunk being the bus ending, and anybody who's played Cyberpunk knows what I'm talking about. I like bittersweet. I like melancholy. I like those kind of things. And there was like a melancholy tone to the way you're like discovering these memories. And I really dug that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of story up front in Tears of the Kingdom. And then it just drops you even colder than Breath of the Wild did. Because Breath of the Wild, you get a little bit of story, then you run outside of the cave, and there's an NPC that you occasionally talk to that's there, and then you kind of just go and do some things. But, you know, some stuff's spelled out to you, some stuff's not. The area where they drop you is really well designed to kind of show you where you need to go. It feels like Tears of the Kingdom, you get a little bit of a story beat, like, or a lot of it, I guess, like 15 minutes or something of story, and then it just drops you completely blind. It's like, good luck, you know? And I don't know if I like that as much as I like the way Breath of the Wild did it, but I assume they did that intentionally because, you know, they just figured most of the people that are playing this already played Breath of the Wild, and they don't need the gentle hand, you know? You just drop them and let them find their way. I think in the end, it wasn't as good of an opening as Breath of the Wild was, but it's still like I ended up having a lot of fun. I got through it. It's interesting finding ways to explore, like exploring like floating structures in the sky is very different than a giant platform that you were on or plateau that you were on in Breath of the Wild. But I had some fun with it. There's still a lot of areas of that part of that tutorial area that I haven't even gotten to. I need to go back and play around there and find some other things. But yeah, I mean, I think I liked it more, the tutorial in general, and more in Breath of the Wild. But I kind of understand where they're coming from with the way they did it in Tears of the Kingdom, is what I'd say.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair assessment.
So let's talk about some anecdotes about this game. And so your anecdote, your first one, I really want to hear you, because I only saw this in text, but I want to hear your story of how you got the game.
So my anecdote is not actually about anything that happened in the game so far. It's about my journey to actually getting the game, because it was a thing. And the short part of it is I did not get the game delivered on Friday like expected, because the city is doing road work on my street, and UPS didn't want to deliver while the road was torn up, which it's only one half. They could have gone to the other side of the street. But I digress. I didn't realize this like I should have. I didn't realize this right away. Nothing stated that was the reason. On the tracking, it said, oh, severe weather or emergency situation. And I'm like, what's severe weather? What kind of emergency could have happened? But
you're looking outside. Is there a tornado?
But I got rescheduled for Monday. And so I went through the weekend just assuming it was going to arrive on Monday. That whatever happened.
Kind of works for you because you work on the weekend. So if you're not getting it on Friday, the weekend's kind of a bad time for you anyways to get it.
Yeah, exactly. And then Monday comes around, and I noticed, by noon, the tracking hadn't changed, hadn't updated at all. It was not out for delivery. And I'm like, okay, this is wrong. Instead of just, waiting around for, anything to happen, I decided to call Best Buy. I called UPS. And UPS, I think the lady said something oh, they had to confirm my address. And so I got a call back from a lady at the processing center who had my package, who asked me to reconfirm my address and my phone number. And I did. And then she said, okay, great. We're going to have this delivered tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I have the word of an actual person who claims to have my package in their possession. So this should be settled. Tuesday comes around, and it's late, and it says it's out for delivery, but it hasn't been delivered. Then I get a call from the lady that I talked to for UPS who said, oh, wait, are they doing road work on your street? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, the driver can't deliver it because your road is closed. You're gonna have to pick it up. And I'm like, are you serious?
And too late too. They do it when you'd have to go the next day.
It was 6 p.m. When I got this call. And I'm like, I'm not going out to UPS, an hour away at 6 p.m. at night. Screw that. There's probably nobody would even be there when I got there probably. So I had to wait till Wednesday afternoon to make the trek, the long, arduous trek to UPS just to get my game.
I have to ask, did you bring your Switch with you so you could play on the way back?
I did not. I brought back the carrier, but no, I did not. I just had my phone. But it was 2 hours, 1 hour there, 1 hour back. And I finally got it.
So I should point out, we normally record the podcast on Wednesday, but I'm like, I gotta give you more time to play the game so we can talk about it.
Yeah.
So we delayed. We're recording this on Thursday now, and so Will's had this game for only a day, basically. And so he's kind of only really done the tutorial in this game, the tutorial area, the Sky Island area, and that's just crazy stuff happens.
Yeah, because I spent all evening last night playing, and you might say, oh, you spent all evening and you're not past the tutorial. It's a long tutorial. You play it, you'll know. It goes on for ages.
You got our own play styles.
They don't even give you... Here's the thing. Here's the criticism that I have. Because they want you to go these 3 temples, and you gotta do a lot of stuff. You gotta solve, a lot of puzzles. You gotta make stuff to cross various bodies of water and other gaps. And you get to the last shrine. You get the last shrine they have to, and then the guy tells you, oh, now you can open the doors to Temple of Time. Great. Guess what you gotta do? You got to manually go back to Temple of Time near where you started the game. That's a trek. And only after you do that do they unlock fast travel. I would have liked fast travel a little sooner.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. And there's some other examples of that coming up that you haven't yet experienced.
Yeah.
But I told you before, I said, without spoiling anything, once you get down to the surface, there's a quest related to Hyrule Castle. Just do it.
Okay.
Like, don't beat around the bush. Just do it, because if you don't, you're going to have a hard time. I had that issue. I'm like tortured by my experiences with RPGs in the past. And you know, like how it used to be, like now they've made quality of life improvements where that it's not as much like that anymore. But it used to be like a big story event would happen, a town would get destroyed, and now it's gone. And if you didn't do any quests or any things that were there, too bad. That's what games were like when we were like younger, you know? That's kind of traumatized me the way I play. So when a game sets like a story marker and says like, okay, here's the next story mark on your map, I like do everything I can possibly do that isn't that.
Yes.
Like I'll run around the map to every possible location, do all that stuff. I found out I was missing something very key that basically made my life very hard because I didn't do that first story quest. Once I landed, it was very much a pain in the ass, really frustrating experience for me. But once I'm like, okay, I just needed to do that story quest, then it kind of made it a little bit better for me. But you don't have to keep following the story quest constantly, but just do that first one after the first one that has to do with Hyrule Castle. Just do that one right away. And then you'll do this kind of natural stuff that follows that. You'll see what it means. But yeah, so that's kind of one of my anecdotes I can tell about this game. I have one from Fried from the Game Witness Discord. I asked some people, and he was the only one who gave us a response, and he gave us his little story, and here it is. I'm gonna read his story. So there's that one set of Sky Islands that's an entire shrine puzzle, where you have to transport a crystal to the shrine to get your reward. The center island has this huge piston you can use to launch yourself to other islands. After completing the shrine challenge, I thought that piston would make for a good launcher for a Zonai wing. I aimed it at a distant sky tower I hadn't reached yet and planned out my approach. Being early in the game, all I really had available was a wing and some fans. Nothing else to really stabilize it onto the piston other than center of balance. The piston is automatic. It'll quickly and roughly shoot out like every 6 seconds. So I got atop it, readied my makeshift fanned wing, and sat on it just in time for the piston to launch us. And launch us it did, but not gracefully at all. I tumbled off it and the wing went haywire, spinning wildly in the air like a fighter jet without a wing. Plan failed. Oh, but what is this? A bright shiny object has just fallen into my view. I chased it down and snatched it in midair, a shooting star piece. So not all was lost, and I landed safely in some woods and was quickly surrounded by scary walking trees. And yeah, there's all sorts of little funny things. If you remember from Breath of the Wild, one of my favorite things about that game, besides the game itself, was just like all the different stories and takes and like videos you'd see of people doing things in a different way than you would. You know, like you know your path is, and then you'd see somebody come up to the same problem that you solved one way and do something completely different. And it's like really fun to see how people handle it in a different way. Or like just, you know, I landed and head off in one direction. Somebody else lands, heads off in a completely different direction. You're in that early game state and you're having very, very different experiences. And it's one of my favorite parts is just like sharing stories with people as they're playing the game.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to do that some more as we get further into the game.
Yeah. I have another anecdote, which is this isn't something particularly unique to Tears of the Kingdom. Like this is something that could have happened in Breath of the Wild too. But I had a funny kind of experience. I was sneaking up on an enemy camp. I was going like really slow, like trying to be stealthy. I'm not really good at the stealthy gameplay. So I was like, I just knew I was eventually going to get seen and it was going to turn into a melee. But like I was trying to sneak up first. So like in trying to see if I could get an arrow shot to take out the sentries first and then finish it off. And as I was sneaking up on the enemy camp, very slowly, as that was happening, a thunderstorm started. So I quickly went into my menu, took off all my metal items because that's, you know, you'll get struck by lightning if that happens. Went back in, continued to sneak up, got caught by the enemies. Enemies realized me. I see that exclamation mark shoot up over their head. And like the second the exclamation mark popped over their head, a lightning bolt struck their camp. And they had a bunch of those like dynamite barrels and it just blew them all and just killed them all. Like I think there was like one guy who was still alive and he had like just hanging by a thread and I just ran up and decked him and that was it. So that's like the kind of thing you could have that experience in Breath of the Wild just as much as you could have it in Tears of the Kingdom. But it was an experience experience I had just recently, like yesterday, I think, and it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But that's it for our Zelda discussion for now. As I said, my favorite thing about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and these kind of games is sharing stories with people and like getting these kind of things. So we're going to try to get some more anecdotes and kind of just do like a mini segment. Maybe we'll call it Anecdotes of the Kingdom or something. Tears of the Anecdotes. I don't know.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to kind of get some other people's anecdotes, have them send in. If you're listening to us and you want to send them in, you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford, or Will is at Voxel Hero. Send us your anecdotes and we'll read them on the podcast as we get them. And we have some other friends that are going to get them. And we'll, of course, talk about our own experiences and stories that we've had. Because that's, part of the fun thing about having a big game like this and us all playing it at the same time is the stories we can share with each other. So that's it for our Zelda segment. And now we're going to move on to full spoilers. This week on Full Spoilers, we're going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, the new movie that finally did right by Dungeons & Dragons, at least in my opinion. I don't know what you think about it yet, but I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a fun romp. I heard somebody refer to it, and it's like the perfect term, as swashbuckling. That's what it felt like. It felt like almost like a pirate adventure or something, even though it has nothing to do with pirates. It just has that kind of feeling to it. So I gotta ask you just first up, did you like the movie?
I enjoyed it. It was decent. I think for me, it's a solid 7 out of 10. It's got, good humor. It's got fun action. The characters are likable.
Mm-hmm. I think we need stuff like this because we have a lot of fantasy stuff now, but it's all dour and very serious,
Yes. I did like that this wasn't trying to be Lord of the Rings. It wasn't trying to be Game of Thrones it wasn't trying to be an epic. It was trying to be an action adventure film.
Yeah, it was like a heist film with a little bit of heart.
And yeah, it stuck that landing. It stuck to that tone. And yeah, it didn't need to be anything grand and epic.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought where it was weak in some of the characterization. I didn't really care about the villain or the villain's plan.
Mm-hmm.
The story was a little bit weak. And it's just I came away walking it thinking that was enjoyable, but there was also nothing that to me is memorable after the movie's over. It's one of those movies you watch and you just think, I watched that.
See, to me, I think a lot of what I liked about it was that the story wasn't that big of a deal. Like as you said, the story wasn't really that big of stuff. To me, it was just I was along for an adventure with this party, and there was a bigger plot going on in the background, but that wasn't the focus. The focus was just on this party.
Yeah.
And they don't even realize how big the story is until it's really happening around them. And even then, their solutions are pretty simple. It's never all too serious about we're the chosen ones to save the world. It's never that. And I really dug that aspect of it. And I think what it does really well is there's a few really, really funny bits in it. There's a few little funny character bits in it. And
yes.
then there's one or two really good action scenes where they just nailed it.
Oh yeah, there's some great action set pieces in this film.
Mainly the druid chase.
Yes.
Where the shape-shifting druid is chasing in constantly changing forms. That was an amazing sequence.
Yeah.
I thought that was thoroughly entertaining. And then humor-wise, the best sequence has to be when they were questioning the skeletons.
Yes. Even though some of the jokes were predictable. The druid questioning, as funny as it was, you could predict the joke right away. Same thing with the bridge in the Underdark, when the Paladin is going over all the rules for crossing the bridge, and you just know something's just going to happen that's just going to completely invalidate everything you just said.
Yeah, that was a bit cliche. It was funny, but it was cliche.
Yeah, exactly.
But I like the way they worked around that, which is that the solution they had to get past that was that the character, Michelle Rodriguez's character, has a walking stick that turns out to be a really powerful magic item, and she just had no idea.
Yeah, she just had no idea. It turns out to be Portal.
Yeah.
Still alive.
So I thought that was pretty funny, and I thought the chase scene with the chubby dragon chasing them, sliding on the gold on its belly.
That was really fun. Again, this movie has some awesome set pieces. Lots of references in this film for Dungeons & Dragons fans. Yes, this is a Dungeons and Dragons movie, so you do see familiar creatures, a lot of locations and stuff familiar to fans of the franchise, like
you
get
see a
name
mimic.
dropped.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a mimic. I like that.
I dug it. I thought it was what was needed at the time. I think that's what I really liked about it. It's not that it's like the greatest movie or anything.
It's a lot better than the last attempt at Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, like infinitely. Yeah. But I think it's what was needed. Like, I think that there's too much serious fantasy. And I like serious fantasy, but there's just too much of it. And we needed something that was just kind of fun. And so I think this kind of like fits perfectly in there. And I've said it before, like, we need more fun stuff. We're getting too much serious stuff right now.
Yeah, we do need more fun stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's like, obvious, I'm not going to go like, oh yeah, this fun movie, this is going to be my contender for movie of the year. It's not, you know, it didn't like change me or make me think or do any, like, it didn't have that kind of impact on me at all. But I thoroughly enjoyed my entire experience watching it.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So that's it for Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. As I said, it's not like a great, amazing movie or anything, but if you just want like to have a fun time, it's a swashbuckling fantasy movie, and it's fun. So that is it for our full spoiler segment. Next week, we are going to be talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which just came out on Disney Plus yesterday. We're going to have a little bit of time, so Will can check that out, and I can rewatch it, and then we can have a nice discussion about the start of Phase 5 of the MCU and what we think about it. That's going to be next week. So, of course, we're probably also going to be, like I said, talking about more Tears of the Kingdom as well, so I look forward to that as well. But our main topic is going to be Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But thank you, everybody, for listening. As I mentioned earlier, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. Will is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page. You can check out our website, thetotalscreen.com. If you go there and open up a container story for our podcast, you'll find all the relevant links you need, as well as just the podcast itself. You can also subscribe to the podcast through your podcast client of choice, like Apple Podcasts or Pocket Casts. Just look us up. It shouldn't be too hard to find us, but we are a pretty small podcast, so you might have to go down a few numbers before you find us. But that's a way that you can subscribe to us. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the OnScreen podcast, the official podcast of The Total Screen. Visit our website at thetotalscreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.